Okay. All right. Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. It's now day 4 of the first Global Gender and Migration Forum, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Innovation Hub. I'm Dr. Lara Susan Goles-Sorki, founder and executive director of the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, the convener of the forum. Thank you to Dr. DeGrau, Dr. Brown, the City University of New York Graduate Center and International Migration Studies, as well as the Scholar Strategy Network for making this event happen today. I'm very excited to learn about new approaches to gender and migration that will be showcased today to discuss the latest trends in research, advocacy, and education. This innovation space serves as a hub to share resources and opportunities for all to explore and to develop their ideas further. So really, this space is designed for all of us to come together. We will start with an open floor pitch session organized around several thematic areas, such as queer displacements, migration, gender, and geopolitics, as well as youth and intergenerational engagement, which I will introduce more fully in just a moment. For now, I will pass it to Dr. DeGrau and to Dr. Aptekar for a welcoming from our partners. So, Els, if you're there, you would
yeah, I'll go. Hi, everybody. You can't see me. I'm somewhere on a mountain in Canada with a very poor internet connection. But my name is Els de Grau. I am the interim director of the International Migration Studies program. And I'm very happy to welcome you to this session on new approaches to gender and migration, a showcase. I want to extend a warm thank you to the Center for Migration, Gender and Justice, as well as the Scholar Strategy Network for co-sponsoring and organizing this event. And so I hope you guys have a good session. I might be going in and out depending on my internet connection. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Lara or maybe to Sofya. So good luck and have fun today. Bye.
Thank you so much, Els. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and I think we're working on making sure that we can hear folks on Zoom. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sofya Aptekar from the School of Labor and Urban Studies here at CUNY. And I'm also here to represent the Scholar Strategy Network, which is a co-sponsor of this exciting event. Scholar Strategy Network is a national membership organization that's made out of college and university-based researchers who are interested in improving policy and strengthening democracy. The idea behind the Scholar Strategy Network is to foster a nationwide culture where research regularly informs policy at every level, local, state, federal. And for this, we believe that scholars must build strong and sustained relationships with policymakers, civic intermediaries, journalists, and each other. And New York City chapter of Scholar Strategy Network, of which I'm co-chair, brings together scholars from our the many local universities and colleges and public policy institutions. And we organize events for our members to help them network with local and national journalists, develop skills to help them increase the impact of their research by doing things like learning how to write an effective op-ed or participating in open science initiatives. So if anyone is interested in joining the Scholar Strategy Network, which is open to junior scholars as well, just talk to me after the event, and we're very happy to co-sponsor.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for making this event happen. And I think we're now all ready to talk about new approaches to gender and migration and research, advocacy, and education. I'm truly honored to serve as what we couldn't quite figure out how to name in terms of, providing feedback and comment, but we landed on expert panelists, and I put that in quotation marks, alongside my colleague, Dr. Jana Reinstrom, to offer feedback and to facilitate engagement in the first part of the session, which again is an open floor pitch session for around an hour. And then we have time to network, follow up, and enjoy some food. So allow me to introduce Jana. Jana is the founder and president of the Kota Alliance, is also a partner to this event. The Kota Alliance is a nonprofit hub for women and women-focused organizations working on gender equality and women's empowerment locally and globally. Founded in 2015, the organization acquired a building in Harlem in 2022 called the Kota Nest to host events, partner organizations, and guests. And I myself have had the pleasure to be a guest at the Kota Nest, and I highly encourage you to check it out and to connect with Jana tonight about possible collaborations with regards to that. Jana is a lifelong human rights activist. She has used her professional skills to evaluate female asylum seeker claims with a focus on female genital mutilation and cutting and other gynecological claims. So thank you so much for joining us today and for being a partner in this event, alongside with the Scholar Strategy Network and the International Migration Studies Program and the Graduate Center here at CUNY. So let's begin. I'll talk just a little bit about how this works, this innovation space that we envisioned. So as mentioned, the pitch session is organized by 3 themes: queer displacements, migration, gender, and geopolitics, and then youth and intergenerational engagement. So each speaker will have about 3 to 5 minutes just to briefly introduce their work, and then there is open floor for feedback, comments, and questions. Again, there's more time for engagement afterwards in the second part of the event over some food and good conversation if you like. And again, I would like to note that this is an open pitch session. So if any of the participants that are here today feel inspired and motivated by what they hear and would like to be added to the lineup, we can certainly make that happen as well as we go along. So just let me know if that might be the case. So let us start with the first theme. The first theme is queer displacements, and we have 2 amazing innovators who will share their work with us. We have Francois Zankih, founder of the first Syrian LGBTQIA+ organization called Guardians of Equality Movement, or GEM, and Aditi Bhanja, research advisor for the Women's Refugee Commission. So please join me in welcoming Francois online, who will pass it to first, and Aditi is here with us today. Thank you for being here. As mentioned, we will begin with Francois. Francois is a young Syrian human rights defender in exile and survivor of torture and sexual violence. He's a junior analyst focusing on conflict, security, gender, and politics. His commitment to civil engagement commenced at the very early age of 16, from his aim of change for what he witnessed, transitioning from being an activist to embarking on a professional career in the field. He is currently a fellow at the Center for Victims of Torture. Francois, as mentioned, boldly and secretly founded the Guardians of Equality movement, again, the first Syrian LGBTQIA+ organization. His resilience shines through in his history of enduring kidnapping and torture incidents in 2016 and 18. He was compelled to flee his home following an execution order, making that a harrowing experience. Francois's life has been marked by 7 displacements, including the latest displacement caused by a devastating earthquake that struck the city where he sought refuge in south-central Turkey. Francois, it's fantastic to have you with us here today. We're humbled to have you, and thanks for joining online. You have the floor.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored
Francois, 1 second. Sorry, we're working out the audio. Sorry, we give us this will not count towards your time, trust. We just want to make sure we understand everything clearly. Give us just a moment. Can you try again?
Yeah, you hear me now?
No, we're trying to figure out the right. I can hear you right up here perfectly, but
Yeah, that happens. So take your time.
yes, that happened. Okay. Thanks for your patience.
So then I do want to check the Zoom output on the Zoom.
Oh, you're right. Oh,
Zoom application.
yes. Oh, because it's saying, okay, that's fine. I think if we go to audio right here. And then also. Which one is the one? Do you need the owl? Yeah. What is it? Is it the same one? Okay. Francois, can we try again?
Yeah, you hear me now? I'm not hearing.
Okay. Maybe one more time?
Yeah, so is it fixed? You hear me? Perfect. That's always happen with the hybrid world.
Everything is ready, and your 5 minutes, we're ready to go right now. Thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, at least we have a witnesses. They would be witness that time it hasn't been counted for me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and pleased to be talking and sharing an experience and like about our cause as a queer Syrian activist. And I really appreciate your time to attend and being interested in our cause, and that give me more hope to work forward when we see people around they really gathering just to trying to fix this world. I have been always hesitated to share my story, but today I'm really encouraged to share my story because I have recognized in the end that my story, it's very important to be shared because it hasn't been done. It's happened to me, not as a person, but also because who I am and to which community I belong. And all of that's happened to me as a queer activist and a human rights defender. And because who I am as a queer person, not because who I am as a tall or skinny or a regular person. So that's why I feel responsible to share this story, because it talks basically for all the people who are like me in my country, Syria. So I am a young Syrian human rights defender, the founder, as mentioned, of GEM. It's the first and only Syrian LGBTQIA+ organization in the history of Syria. We worked for protection and the human rights of the Syrian LGBTQIA+ people. As mentioned, I have been displaced more than one time, kidnapped twice with torture physically, mentally, and sexually. And the first one, it was in 2016 and 2018, till I left Syria after a death penalty against me because of my activism. And within, like, focusing on the displacement, I have been displaced internally and externally, like internally and asylum externally outside of Syria. I have crossed the border between Syria to Turkey for 2.5 nights, staying literally with no good shelter, just working, rarely having water and some food. And when I was there, I was young enough to not be being involved and understanding the international system. And I didn't understand at that time that the policy would be impacting my suffering positively or negatively. And I never understand that would be there might be a people like us here gathering and thinking of me. And because at that time, literally, I felt no one would feel me ever, even my family. But if I would knew that there is people like you now gathering and talking about the struggle of those people, I would have some hope and motivation to walk more in that mountain and to cross to Turkey. But anyway, I have made it to Turkey, and then many things happened. Long story, but I'm sharing those details to start as an introduction about the policy of the queer displacement. The queer and LGBTQIA plus people, they are the people who have been always displaced because of who they are, and the struggles that they are facing, it's called individual security. That means even if my country, there is no war or there is no conflict, those people, they have the right to seek an asylum with the right and dignity. But even my country, Syria, it has the worst war after the World War II. And even though we would see from a very progressive countries, like the previous internal affairs minister who mentioned that being gay, it's not a justifying to seek an asylum. But I believe this quote would be affecting a lot of people around the world. And that's what I meant when I mentioned I didn't know that there is a policy would be mobilized to cross the border in front of me, even when I am being, there is no way to stay in Syria. So queer displacement has a lot of struggle. We have done a study for the people, for the Syrian LGBTQ inside and outside Syria. And I would love if there is an opportunity, Lara, to share some of the presentation and the findings, such as I can read it if it's hard to share it on the screen. We have...
You should be able to share your screen if you would like to try.
Here we go.
Okay.
And everything is working from my side. Wow.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Yeah. So talking about torture in Syria for the Syrian LGBTQ people, we have asked the people when they were inside Syria if they have subjected to torture. 47% of the people who participated in the study, they have been subjected to a torture before leaving Syria. And we have a question here thinking about the law in Syria. Of course, the law is criminalizing the same-sex relationship, like many countries in the Near East Levant or the Middle East in general, that might arrive to a death penalty, but in Syria, it's up to 3 years in the jail for being same-sex, for having a same-sex relationship.
Wow.
For the queer displaced outside of Syria, 100% they don't feel safe, and they don't think to return to Syria. When we're seeing all of these findings talking about the real danger, we're talking about torture, death, violence, again, based on individuals, because who they are as individuals, not because of a group crisis. And what's the difference between individual security and the group security? It's mean when it's a group security, it's mean because of conflict, because of a threat that's against all the population in the country. But when we're talking about individuals, because who they are as a human rights defenders or a member of the LGBTQ people or being minorities or marginalized group. And thinking about this, we believe policy should be enhanced, and it's really confusing for all of us as a people working in the policy level and the human rights from where to start actually. But it's important to understand it will be confusing always, it will be always hard, and it will be very political, but we need to use all the tools, including the policy. For me, my approach on human rights is to focus on the policy level because it's really impacting the people and the individual and their lives. And basically, Lara, please, I'm not counting. I don't have a counter next to me. So if you would like to notify me to like before 1 minute.
It's, yes, 1 minute or 30 seconds.
Because I have an idea, it's really hard to have a counter in front of me, so I wouldn't be able to talk. And so thank you once again for having me and listening to me. And if you have any question or if you are interested for communication about this talk and topics that I have talked about, please do not hesitate to reach out to me by the email from connection from Lara. And thanks once again, and we count on you. I would like to mention in the end about the Iraqis LGBTQIA people. The Iraqis LGBTQIA people now, they are facing a death penalties against them by new laws and policies that say the LGBTQ individuals and the people who work in gender issue and LGBTQ issues should be literally having a death penalty. The situation in Iraq, it's really danger, and we invite you to search about that. And our organization released a petition and inviting the people to sign this petition. Please do not hesitate to visit our website or see the petition. If you will be searching about the LGBTQ Iraqis people who facing a death against them. And we have documented 2 murders and tens of violations and torture in Iraq after this proposal of the law. It's not they didn't implement it yet. Even just the proposal of it, it's collated the community against them organized group, and they are facing a real risk. And I invite you to search about that and be their voices, because there is no real advocacy for their cause and about what's happening there. Thank you once again, and have a great day. And I wish I would be there with you. And thank you so much. Bye.
Well, thank you very much, Francois, for being with us today over Zoom and for sharing your experiences and the important work that you're doing. We have a few moments if anyone would like to comment, follow up with a question, or provide any feedback for Francois.
What are the, where can we see the webpage of the organization?
Francois, could you share your webpage either in the chat or otherwise?
Yeah. So if you will search Guardians of Equality Movement, GEM.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you find, I can share the website right away.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Natalie, please go ahead.
I was just wondering, you mentioned Syria and Iraq. Are there any other countries that your organization is working in?
So basically, we are a Syrian LGBTQ organization, but we focus on the Levant or in the Near East, which is Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Turkey, and Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey. And yeah, so we focus on those. So on Syria and the neighboring countries of Syria, including Jordan, but mainly we focus on the Syrian LGBTQ, but we intervened as a solidarity with the other causes on the region that we work on, which is the Levant or the Near East. This is the website, our website.
We have one more question, Francois.
Francois, do you get any support, any funding from any like EU or something like that?
Actually, we cooperate with on policy level and advocacy. We cooperate with many countries like EU members, the US Department of State. So far, we don't have a governmental funding except a small fund from the UN, but we have a funding from philanthropy, a US philanthropy. But we're trying to build something with the US Department of State, especially the DRL, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. But so far, we didn't get any fund from governmental agencies, but we're trying and coordinating with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one more. Yeah. Joanne, go ahead.
Do you work with Lebash or with All Out?
Yeah, actually, we released the petition for Iraqis LGBTQ with All Out. No, yeah, it was All Out, exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Francois. If you would like to stay around and you know, be in the space with us, you're more than welcome to, and thank you for being here again.
Thank you. No, I would love to stay actually if it's open.
Okay,
for,
yeah, of course,
here's a discussion. Yeah,
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work that you do. I will now introduce our second speaker as part of this first thematic aspect and focus of our innovation hub. And our second speaker is Aditi Bhanja. Aditi leads evaluation and program efforts across a variety of the Women's Refugee Commission's focus areas, from integrating gender-based violence and economic recovery programming for survivors to improving access to sexual and reproductive health care for women, to addressing sexual violence against adolescent boys, male youth, and individuals with diverse SOGIESC. Aditi holds a Master's of Public Health in Epidemiology from New York University. Fundamentally, she is committed to turning research to action and improving the lives of the most vulnerable amongst us. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing your work.
Thank you so much.
I'd just like to say I'm truly humbled to even share the floor with you, Francois, if you can hear me or see me. So thank you so much for joining this panel today. So as was mentioned, my name is Aditi Bhanja. I'm a research advisor for the Women's Refugee Commission. And today I'll be sharing some of our work around the Sexual Violence Project and the ways that we intend to move forward. So the Sexual Violence Project began in 2018 as a multi-year initiative to document the diverse characteristics, scopes, and consequences of sexual violence against people in humanitarian crises who identified as male or were designated male at birth, including individuals with diverse SOGIESC or sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics. I'll be using that acronym alone. This work also examined how women and girls are impacted by the sexual violence against men and boys. And so in phase 1, we conducted research in 3 refugee settings with the Rohingya refugee community in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, among refugees and migrants traveling the central Mediterranean route through Libya to Italy, and with refugees in Nairobi and Mombasa, Kenya. And from that research, we found that sexual violence against men and boys was not a rare occurrence. Men reported knowing of, witnessing, or experiencing sexual violence in both their conflict-afflicted settings and in their host communities, which also included witnessing sexual violence inflicted on female and family members. Moreover, displaced adolescent boys and individuals with diverse SOGIESC were at much higher risk or more exposed to sexual violence and exploitation than their adult or their cisgender heterosexual counterparts. We also found that practitioners and service providers lacked the tools and resources necessary to effectively address sexual violence perpetrated against male survivors, including adolescent boys and male youth and all their diversity in these humanitarian settings. Practitioner and provider attitudes, biases, and misconceptions, as well as the lack of resources, have been found to be major deterrents for male survivors accessing and receiving quality services and care that meet their immediate and long-term needs following sexual violence. Peer support groups, which are often led by trained facilitators with some level of specialization in mental health and psychosocial support, can provide all survivors with a safe and supportive space to process their experiences alongside people who understand what they're going through and to allow them to begin healing. Peer support groups can also help connect survivors with key resources such as legal assistance or financial support, which may be particularly important as survivors may face new or increased social and economic vulnerabilities as a result of the violence they've experienced. However, in humanitarian and conflict-afflicted settings, there is a dearth of clinical or specialized staff to facilitate such support to survivors of sexual violence. So in phase 2, we developed a training curriculum to fill this gap and to deliver non-clinical group-based peer support to adolescent boy and male youth survivors in all their diversity. Given the stigma associated with being a survivor, the peer support group sessions also include adolescent boys and male youth who are at risk of sexual violence. And our overall aims were to increase the good quality, appropriate, non-clinical mental health services for adolescent boys and male youth survivors in all their diversity. And 2, to ensure the inclusion of LGBTQ populations in sexual violence response measures that target mental health and psychosocial well-being. The training curriculum is divided into 2 parts. The first part includes a theoretical module that ensures frontline non-MHPSS humanitarian workers and staff use human rights-based approaches that are holistic, dignified, and unbiased to engage with and address the diverse identities, needs, culture, and wishes of adolescent boy and male youth survivors. The second part includes intervention modules led by an experienced MHPSS specialist, which are aimed to be delivered directly to non-specialist peer support group leaders and provide them with the information and guidance necessary to adapt, implement, monitor, and evaluate peer support group and corresponding activities that are relevant to their particular context and needs. With this curriculum, we piloted a 5-day training workshop for humanitarian aid service providers in 3 locations: Bogota, Colombia, Beirut, Lebanon, and Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. And as we enter the next phase of our project, we aim to work with local partners to implement these peer support groups and to evaluate the effectiveness of this model to aid in the recovery of crisis-affected adolescent boys and male youth survivors, including those with diverse SOGIES.
Thanks so much. Floor is
Questions?
open.
Yeah.
Questions.
I know I talked a lot. I apologize.
No,
Yes,
you're
please.
right on. Is the research you mentioned available? Is there a report online?
Yeah, absolutely. It's under the Sexual Violence Project, WRC. We have all 3 individual studies from the 3 locations that I mentioned, as well as a sort of compare and contrast across all those locations. And we also have some, updated research that we've done. We did a study on barriers for service provision or for service providers in Ukraine regarding male survivors in that context. So yeah, there's like a ton of stuff. The studies that I mentioned are also from 2018, 2019, so they're a little bit dated now, so.
Could you actually speak a little bit to the contrast, so similarities, differences, and also then now in terms of the next phase, if you're considering challenges, for instance, how might you redevelop, reconfigure some of the aspects there?
Yeah, so, great question. So between the context, there's of course a lot of similarities. In Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, it's like very prevalent that, male survivors, either witnessed, or, were witnessing, sexual violence against, family members. A lot of men reported, I think it was like 11 out of 89, Rohingya men that we interviewed reported that they saw, dead family members with, some genital mutilation. And they weren't sure if that happened before or after, their death, essentially. So that context was very particular. It was, a lot of, violence inflicted on both men and women. And a lot of family members who shared, similar experiences of violence. In the context with, refugees from Libya, there was a dedicated instance, where, a refugee man reported that, there was a couple that was found out, 2 gay men who were found out by armed forces and then were specifically selected to endure, sexual torture, sexual exploitation because of their gay identity. And, in that study in particular, I believe, there were, I think it was like all of the individuals with diverse OGS in that group reported that they had experienced sexual violence or sexual exploitation. So it was like it's 26 people that were in that group, in that cohort. So, for all of them to come forward and say, yes, this happened to me, was really not shocking, but, really salient. As we are moving forward, I think a lot of that research really informed what we're doing right now, especially around the training curriculum that we piloted. We're also developing a shorter toolkit on just addressing sexual exploitation of adolescent boys and male youth, especially for service providers working in host communities, because displaced adolescent boys and male youth in those particular contexts do often face a lot of, economic vulnerabilities that lead them to being sexually exploited. So we've also launched that as a sort of partner to this training curriculum as well. And I think also moving forward, we're really looking to contextualize all of these contexts are so different, and the needs, the language even around diverse identities is really different. So we're hoping to contextualize some of this guidance through some background notes or how do I say this? Through background notes or sort of sister materials to go with the toolkit, so that can inform service providers and practitioners in that context about what we've understood about leading these, these trainings in different contexts and different areas, and some of the research that we've also conducted.
Great, yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, this is all really fascinating. Thanks for sharing this important work. Are there any other comments or questions or online? Okay, I have more, but we can chat
Okay,
later,
that's
so
okay,
thank
yeah.
you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move to our second theme for the innovation space, namely the intersection of migration, gender, and geopolitics. And we have three speakers as part of this the second thematic aspect. So we have, again, pulling up all the bios that came in. We have Dr. Sofya Aptekar, Associate Professor of Urban Studies at the City University of New York School of Labor and Urban Studies. We also have Diana Murasan, Community Engagement Manager for the Innovation Hub at CWS Global, as well as Research and Advocacy Fellow at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, meaning that I have had the great pleasure of working with Diana as part of our youth engagement academy. And we also have with us Maria Fernanda Camara, a lawyer and activist for women's rights and environmental justice. And so please join me in welcoming our three speakers. We will begin with Dr. Aptekar. Dr. Aptekar is, as mentioned, Associate Professor of Urban Studies at the City University of New York School of Labor and Urban Studies. She has a new book published by MIT Press called Green Card Soldier: Between Model Immigrant and Security Threat. And we will hear more about that from a particular gender perspective. So thank you.
Thank you for that intro. Yeah, I'm gonna, my book is not entirely gender focused, but being about immigrants in the US military, there's a large gender component to it because the US military is a deeply gendered institution. So I'm just gonna pull out a couple of threads to share with folks, and as I kind of contemplate possibly doing more in that type of research, and good time for feedback. So first, in looking at what pushes immigrants to enlist in the US military, one of the things that I came to consider is the way the immigration system itself is embedded in patriarchy and can push some women to join the military, some immigrant women. So for example, women whose immigration status is contingent on their marriages to US citizens, if sometimes enlist because their marriages are, pose threat in some way to their stability in their ability to stay in the United States. So if they're worried about their marriage breaking up because of abuse and losing their conditional green card, that could be one of the reasons they join the military. But also at this point of, enlisting, deciding to join the military, masculinities play a tremendously important and interesting role. So I found, my book is based on interviews with immigrants from 28 countries from across the world. And so it was really interesting to see the kind of a different cultural schemas of warrior masculinities of what makes a real man and what makes a warrior or soldier kind of come together in the US context and shape the decision-making of these immigrant men to enlist, as well as women who also had to grapple with ideas of masculinity as they were joining this institution. So building one's masculinity, proving one's masculinity in these different formations, important reasons that people join the military. Second point that I focused on was the actual experience of being in the military and doing military labor so the US military is about 16% women right now. And that was roughly the percent among those that I interviewed, which is over 70 people. And I found that overwhelmingly, it was their gender identity that really shaped their experience in the military. Even as, you know, it might also been kind of tweaked by being considered a forever foreigner for some of my Asian participants. Being gendered as female was kind of an overwhelming master status. So, you know, warrior masculinity and masculinized culture of the US military has not really been very disturbed by inclusion of women in it. And so instead, women are expected to conform to the existing culture of the military, which breeds rampant sexual harassment and abuse. And women kind of found themselves conditional members who had to continuously prove themselves. And immigrant women might be especially reluctant to, for example, come forth and report abuse or break their military contracts to escape an abusive situation, because their immigration status is also, their ability to become a US citizen is contingent on the contract that they signed with the US military. Another thing I want to mention is that the racialized experiences of gender are very important. So probably many of you know the dominant frameworks of Asian masculinities in the United States really shape the experience of Asian men, period, but also Asian men and Asian immigrant men who enlist in the US military. So anything from struggling to disprove negative evaluations of one's masculinity, dealing with racialized assumptions of even one's age and one's body, and being at the same time suspected of disloyalty. So there's really many layers. And also the stigma attached to Asian masculinities, I found, can push Asian immigrant youth to enlist to try to counteract the stigma and the deficiencies that are associated with it. And also once they're in the military, then push themselves to perform hegemonic masculinities as a military worker, which can also result in higher risk of injury and harm to myself and others. Finally, the military is also a heteronormative institution, treating heterosexuality and its concomitant gender roles as normal. So my research did include a few LGBTQ immigrants who were serving in the military, who had served in the military, which is not surprising given the rather high general representation of queer people in the US military. When our queer youth face social economic obstacles in their transition to adulthood, exacerbated often by rejection by their families, discrimination, violence, the military is there as a survival strategy. In fact, the US military is the largest employer of trans people in the United States for that reason. So some of the people I talked to served in the don't ask, don't tell era of the US military. And so, you know, they really had to keep their identity hidden so that they wouldn't be expelled from the military. And because they were immigrants, that also, you know, was a risk that they faced in terms of losing the immigration benefits of their military service. So don't ask, don't tell has been repealed, but homophobia and transphobia are very much present in the military, and they shape the experience of all military workers. So in many ways, the inclusion of queer workers reinforces the hegemonic masculinities that dominate the military. So those are some observations on gender among immigrants serving in the US military.
Thank you so much for these.
I'll stay here and think.
The floor is open. Questions, comments, feedback? Yeah, we already have one. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for explaining all your research. I am curious, as the US military has now basically banned undocumented immigrants from joining the US military, as to my understanding. And I'm wondering how this shifts demographics, and I ask mostly because up until very recently, I was doing presentations at high schools. And many high school students of both genders expressed interest in joining the military, in part because of, the notion of, oh, this may be a pathway for a regular migration status. Plus masculinity, plus all the other layers that you just mentioned. But my response to that was, well, actually, I'm not sure if you can join in at this time because I know there have been some restrictions put in place by the military to purposely ban undocumented migrants and immigrants from joining it. So my question is I'm not sure when this was put in place, but my question is how this may affect the demographics of the military.
Yeah, no, thank you for that great question. So all branches of the US military have for a long time had, like you have to have a lawful permanent residency or green card to enlist. I think what some of the young people you encountered may have, what may have set their hopes high on their ability to enlist is that between 2007 and 2017, there was a special program that allowed people without a green card to enlist. That program only enlisted 10,000 people over its 10 years. And it was really focused on people with student visas, F1s, and H1B visas. And it's called the Military Accessions of Vital National Importance of MOVNI. And so you had to prove that you had a skill that was vital to the national interest of the United States. How the vast majority of people demonstrated that skill is being able to speak one of 50 or so languages that the US deems as militarily, necessary for our security. And Spanish, for example, is not on that list. But a lot of Indian, Pakistani, and Korean immigrants on temporary visas were also enlisted through that provision. For a very brief moment and only affecting about 500 people with DACA status would also enlist. And so that kind of percolated through immigrant communities and was, much bigger than the actual ability to do so. I hope that helps. Very technical answer. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the audience here or from our audience online? I have one. I always have questions or comments because this is also fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm curious about and this is the academic in me, the methodology or the approach with regards to this. Did the gender dynamics come up as you were conducting your work and then you started to shift and looking into this more? Or did you look into this from the get-go, since at the beginning you mentioned that gender was not necessarily a fundamental component? So I'm just curious about the process of your research.
No, thanks for asking that. Yes, I'm a migration scholar who mostly focuses on race. So it was not the lens that came in. And so it did really come from the data, which was heavily interviews, but also a lot of analysis of social media, where I actually saw a lot of masculinity stuff playing out. And so that shaped what then I asked during interviews. That was mostly for men. With women, that was such an overwhelming part of what they were sharing, right? So that there was no way not to see that analytically. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Any other feedback or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, we will now
move to our next speaker and sticking with the affiliation to the City University of New York, a very recent graduate that we have with us today will be sharing actually some research from the graduate studies and the master's. Diana Muresan is a Romanian immigrant who came to the US when she was 4. She's now a community engagement manager for the Innovation Hub at CWS Global. And she works on creating and testing innovative ways to engage with new and more diverse audiences, particularly youth. As mentioned, Diana just earned her master's in international relations with a concentration in international non-governmental organizations from the Marx School of Public and International Affairs. She is a proud double CUNY alumni as she studied psychology and political science at Hunter College. She is a monitoring and evaluation specialist and has spent most of her academic, professional, and personal research centering around climate, migration, and forced labor. Please join me in welcoming Diana.
I also echo the sentiments that I am in awe of the people who have been presenting. I feel very fortunate to be up here with all of you. Please feel free to warn me when my time is getting close.
I think Isha got it.
Perfect, because I will ramble on. So I don't have any practical things that I will be presenting because I'm not presenting on any projects. I will be talking about some of my findings that came out of my thesis that I recently wrote. In my last semester, I wrote a paper on challenges faced by Latin migrant youth in New York City, trying to access mental health care services. And together we were analyzing the Connections to Care program, which is a 5-year initiative created by the state to try to address the needs for this vulnerable population, especially in the growing migration crisis. The program was deemed to have failed, mostly because New York City did not do a very good job of planning. But in the report, you will not find that that was the reason, but through our interviews of several community-based organizations that were part of it, they will all credit it to that being the reason to why, because most of the initiatives that came out of it, they thought were very, very effective and were very sad to see the programs disappear. The main one was the connection that community-based organizations had to mental health care professionals, because community-based organizations themselves do not have the capacity to provide mental health care services for a lot of the people or the experience to handle such traumatic experiences that they encounter. I will say there isn't a huge gender focus on this, and that is a bit on purpose because this is not something that is coming up in the conversations at all. It is something that we have addressed, and there are several components where it does come up, but it really is not a focus that is centered around this. But when we talk about migration, we can't only talk about it in terms of the Oregon countries that are failing their citizens. We have to talk about the nations that are receiving these migrants, and many of them that are involved in perpetuating the growing poly crisis that is making the living conditions of these developing countries untenable. So the C2C program was essentially trying to connect mental health care professionals to community-based organizations. A lot of the challenges are the ones that you can guess yourself: workforce shortages, accessibility barriers, navigating the system. Me and my partners all spoke English. We're all from New York City. We could not figure out, it took us weeks to find out where to even access these services from. And of course, too much reliance on interns to do a lot of the work which they are not trained to do. But the one that I would like to really focus on, that I think is the most important, is the lack in cultural competencies that is not being necessarily included. One of the biggest limitations was language, of course, staffing shortages of providers, lack of funding, of course. But the biggest one, again, comes from cultural competencies. And with that, I want to say that the majority of the focus on tackling that was by getting people who speak Spanish. And oftentimes when we asked them, they said most of our Spanish speakers weren't even native Spanish speakers. They were people who learned to speak Spanish. So not only are they ones who probably struggle to speak the language, they are ones who do not have the background understanding of the unique experiences of the people coming in. Yes, and that is just speaking the language is only speaks to such a small piece of cultural competency. Especially but even to the language, a lot of them were saying that a lot of the languages don't even really translate because Spanish is not one language. Each country has their own dialects, and within that there were so many new indigenous languages that are coming in that they do not have access to even interpreters for these things. And so where we did see the aspect of gender and how that played in was that a lot of the staff that are working on this at the community-based organizations are often people who are survivors themselves or who are migrants who do have these experiences. And a lot of them come from sexual trauma. And as we heard, migrants face almost 50% of them will undergo sexual violence and trauma. And so when you are experiencing this yourself and having to constantly work with people who are talking about this, you are constantly having to stop yourself from being re-triggered by these experiences and putting that burden on especially women. Not saying just women, because of course men undergo this as well, as we've seen in many of the presentations, but to have to go through this over and over again is such a heavy burden to put on people. But one of the most interesting things that came out of it that we heard, and was really only from one person, was that a lot of the cultural competencies do not take into account the different cultural makeup of the other countries. I recently had seen a show that was from a Korean standpoint, and he was saying Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds. And that is so important when we think about the fact that the US is an individualistic country. When we're talking about Latin migrants, they come from typically collectivist cultures. And so when they're coming here and they're being told, these are the ways that we can help you, these are ways that we can approach you, oftentimes they are not things they can put into practice. They cannot cut out toxic family members. That is not a thing. So the way that the structures of even the therapy that we have, that we are offering, not only is it limited, but is really not understanding the experience of them. Yeah. And so what the last thing I'll leave you with is that the responses from the interviews underscore the value of understanding and incorporating cultural context, traditions, beliefs, and practices of the populations being served where planning for mental health support. One respondent emphasized the need to consider patients' cultural preferences and previous successful approaches that may have involved non-traditional methods like herbal remedies, spiritual practice, or dietary considerations. For instance, within the Latinx community, there's a tendency to embrace treatments around aromatherapy, acupuncture, yoga, and the use of, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this wrong, curanderos, or shamanistic and spiritual leaders, and the remedies that they have for mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual illnesses. So with that, I'll leave you with the thought of how can we embrace the cultures where these migrants are coming from in a country that does not embrace their culture, that is designed with a culture that is not keeping them in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. For sharing your research, and we have a question from Diana, and we have a response by Yana.
Or a question rather, actually.
A question.
Yeah, just maybe I missed it, but you did research among community groups in New York City.
Yeah, so the Connections to Care program had a list of, I think, 10 community-based organizations, and then they matched each with a mental health care professional. And so we interviewed 4 or 5 of them that were a part of the program, one of them that had decided to not be a part of it because of the lack of planning, and then we interviewed the organization that I think is involved with an academic program that is working on updating the Connections to Care program to plan it better. And so our interviews came from mostly the community-based organizations that were.
Can you describe them a little bit more? Like, were they like specifically like community-based towards a particular ethnic group or just general?
Yeah, so it was kind of a mixed bag. We tried to find the ones that, because we were speaking to the migrant experience, particularly the Latin community. But a lot of the organizations were pretty general in the work that they were doing. There were a few that were centered around migrants, around Latino experiences. Some of them were like food banks, Yeah, so it was kind of a mixed bag, but there wasn't one particular group that was being focused on. We just tried to ask them specifically about the clients that they had who were coming from these populations, which was a lot of them, especially because American crisis is growing, and the fact that most undocumented people do not have access through New York City anymore. They say that they do, but it's so impossible to get these, so they have to go through community-based organizations. So there is a heavy burden on them to help these populations.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was wondering, and I don't know if your research can speak to this, but were the barriers that they were facing specific to this program, or did it feel like that was just the general environment? Just you sort of spoke to how, America does not culturally adapt to other immigrant cultures,
Yeah.
right? And so I wanted to know if that was just specifically about this program, or if that was just the general sentiment that they also faced.
Yeah, so a lot of the barriers were more around the logistics of getting access. But of course, when we were reading through the reports, they said, yeah, cultural competencies, but the only thing they really mentioned was language and getting interpreters. Which is something that they're working on, creating a hotline that will have 50 different languages that people can call here in New York City to get mental health services. But the cultural competencies, the real extent of it, just came out of the conversations that they were having. Something that isn't being fully addressed at the point. So it's something that the people in the field understand, but it hasn't quite made it to how are we putting this into practice yet. Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if there's
No,
something me.
it's you.
I was just wondering if there's any recommendations around cultural competencies that came out of your research, just given the diversity of asylum seeker or refugee experiences in the city, that it practically for already under-resourced CSOs, it can be challenging already. If there's any kind of practical pieces that seems that might be feasible to implement.
Yeah, so there were a couple of them that they are creating now. I think the one that is the most relevant is either creating an access line supporting with more languages. They are trying to expand a training to staff. But I think the one that is probably the most important, that I think really cuts across sectors, is working community groups. And that is that they are extending beyond community-based organizations to where these migrants find their community. So this is through churches, community leaders, and community centers. And so the city is working on how to better create partnerships with them. But of course, this is always very, it's often limited in scope. We'll say that. But in terms of community groups, that's sort of the big space where they were like, this is the easiest way to reach them, and it's in a way to do less work for themselves, because there are people who already have these experiences. So it's, yes, we can train our staff, but why don't we also work with the community groups that are already doing this, that already have experience in this, and can offer more holistic approaches that they already are familiar with, that they hopefully still practice themselves.
Great, thank you very much, Diana. Okay, we will now move to our third speaker on this particular theme. And there is a story behind us meeting. Maria Fernanda and her delegation that you met briefly earlier came to our opening event on Monday on the state of gender and migration. And shared some of their work there and presented some intriguing questions. And then I said, well, why don't you come on Thursday and share with us with a different crowd? And so here we are. Maria Fernanda Camara is a lawyer and activist for women's rights and environmental justice.
For 10 years, she has worked to promote the rights of women and girls. She developed the first documentary in climate adaptation from a rural perspective, which premiered at COP27 in Egypt and at the UN Climate Change Conference, being a speaker there on panels of the governments of Zimbabwe, Chile, and Thailand. During the week of the high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly in September 2022. Maria Fernanda participated in the Transforming Education Summit at the UN offices in New York, having the opportunity to promote diverse perspectives on the topics. In 2023, she was part of the Mexican youth delegation to the UN High-Level Forum, and also here in New York. And in 2021, she was the co-creator of the documentary I cannot pronounce, and you will hopefully tell us, please, that portrays the political reality of women in communities and customs in Waka. So thank you very much for being here. It's great that we can connect again, and we look forward to learning more from you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Fernanda Cámara. I'm from Mexico, and I'm a activist around feminism and gender justice and climate justice, because I'm a really believer of we don't have gender justice without climate justice. And the situation in Mexico, it's very complicated. It's very complicated. So I'm here to try to talk to you what happened in Mexico around gender, around migration, and around violence. Mexico is a country where gender violence is a critical and sad reality. There are various forms of violence that affect women in my country, in the public and private settings. We refer public settings as a government, the streets, the like companies, the work service. And in a private city, we refer as a home. The private is the home. It's all around the cleaning and the family and children. And women suffer violence in the public and private moods in Mexico. When we talk about the violence that women experience in my country, we must always talk about the concept of intersectionality. Maybe all of you know this concept, but we understand in Mexico intersectionality as an analysis strategic to identify how much type of violence affect one person. In Mexico, we have a really type of diversity. We have women, white women like me, and we have an indigenous woman. We have a poor women in the poverty. We have very rich women that work in companies, and women that work in their homes. But all of us suffer violence. And that's important for understanding intersectionality. So in that way, I'm part of the first delegation of Nosotras para Ellas, an organization in Mexico that make a report of 18 types of violence in Mexico. In this report, we try to analyze and understand what happened around the stalking. The stalking is here in the United States and in Canada. It's in the penal code, but in Mexico, not. In Mexico, the legislation understands the stalking as a minimum thing, not relevant for the women's life. We have in this report, wait a minute, please. This is our report. Called Nosotras en Mexico. We're in Mexico, and compilate these 18 violence, stalking, domestic violence, aesthetic violence. The aesthetic violence is very interesting because it's about what happened with all bodies and the beauty standards. We have sexual violence. We have digital violence. In Mexico, we have the first case, international case around the digital violence. It's the case of Olympia. Olympia is now an activist that suffered digital violence because her ex-boyfriend shared her intimate photograph and videos. And the result of this, it's now a legislation called Ley Olimpia that tried to and work for have a lot of justice of the woman that suffered that type of violence. In my opinion, it's very difficult make justice in something like this because it's a public affectation. We have an article around women in the migration, and that's my favorite. And I share with all of you a little bit of that. Mexico is now an important and crucial country in the migration process. In the past, we be only an transfer country. Now we are transfer country and a staying country. The migrants stay in Mexico and live in Mexico, but we don't have the buildings, we don't have the money, and we don't have the structure, political structure, and strict constructor for have a lot of migrants in our cities. I mean, New York, it's a migrant city, and in my opinion, New York don't have the capacity for this increase of migration. In Mexico, it's not the same because we don't have anything. We don't have money, we don't have public policies, we don't have buildings, we don't have a mindset for the migration process. In this article, we talk a little bit about what happened in women in this process of migrants and a little bit of menstruation process when you are a woman in transit of migration. This is a very horrible fact, but a lot of women in this process in Mexico prefer be pregnant or don't have their menstruation in the process because they don't have the opportunity to access of products, of menstrual products in more than 10 months. So as you can see, it's a very critical situation, and thank you so much for the opportunity we share with all of you.
Thank you so much. Great to have you.
Question, please.
Yes, questions, comments, feedback. You have one? In just a moment, okay.
I don't have a question, but just thank you for your work, because I know this is such a difficult topic, and especially in the issue of gender-based violence, especially for women in Mexico, is so extreme. At the session we were at yesterday, we were talking about Venezuelans coming up, and all of them were saying that people are not stopping in Mexico. It is not safe for women there, so they have to keep going or stop somewhere else. So yeah, just thank you for sharing. It's
No, yes,
amazing.
Mexico is not safe for Mexican women. Obviously, it's not safe for migrant women. The statistic says that 11 women die per day in Mexico. 11 per day. So the data say anything.
Yeah. So, for context, I'm from El Salvador, which is a country where, which is a sending country where, of course, many folks go through Mexico to cross the US border. But especially with current policies and previous policies from the previous administration and current, we have the stay in Mexico policy to, call it that. So I guess the question is, how do you see women adapting to life in Mexico as they are being forced to stay there longer, or either by choice or by policy, they're being forced to stay longer? So how do you see that adaptation of women, LGBTQ+ folks in Mexico?
For the migration?
Yes.
The migration? Okay, this is very complex for me because I'm a Mexican woman, and the only structure of adaptation I know, it's because it's my only option. So my adaptation content is I'm Mexican and I live in Mexico and I have a lot of privilege, And that's the reason why I live in my country, but I don't have other option. So the adaptation for migrants and the migration process in Mexico, for me, it's a work for the government. The government needs change the public policies for have the opportunity of adaptation, because now they don't have any opportunity. They don't have opportunity for go to school or have a house or anything. Migration for people in Mexico live in the streets. So adaptation, it's not a reality, and I don't be here for lie. This is not a reality, and if we don't change the public policies and the law, because the law in Mexico, it's not for the migrant people, we don't have the opportunity to create an adaptation process.
And are there any nonprofit organizations or churches or, that step in, to fill this void in terms of protecting migrant women?
That's my favorite topic. Because in Mexico, the organizations don't have money.
Yeah.
I don't know what is the structure here in the United States. I know a little bit of in Europe. In Europe, I know the nonprofits have the opportunity to receive a lot of money from the companies and in some cases from the government. But in Mexico, government don't put money in the nonprofits. And for have money from a company, you need a special status and the economic ministry. So if you don't have this special status, a company don't have the opportunity to give you money. So the 99% of the nonprofits in Mexico don't have too much money. They have money like from donation, but it's not enough to have a house or have a special place for that person. So, and yeah, the activists in Mexico, it's not a work. It's a work for us, but it's not a work in money terms. So that's another complex situation now.
Thank you very much.
A photo with the report, please.
Okay, someone could.
No, with you.
Oh, with
Yes.
me? Okay, okay.
Because you are the reason that we are
Oh,
here.
thank you. Wait, 1, 2. If you want to step a little forward because of the
Projector.
because of the light.
I'd
Little
keep going.
more.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. There we go. 3, 2, lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. Well, that's what this week is about, and that's what we envisioned with the forum and with the different events. So thank you very much. We have one more thematic area that we will be exploring with regards to that. So thank you for your patience, and also feel free if you would like to grab some food in between. We will also have time afterwards for this, but we will now move to our third theme of the Innovation Hub, which is about youth and intergenerational engagement. For this theme, we will learn from Natalie Alper, member of Politics for Her outreach team, who also works at the New York Immigration Coalition. And we will also hear online from Anousheh Saeed, co-founder and CEO of Borderless. So please join me in welcoming Natalie here, and with us online, Anousheh. Natalie, as mentioned, is a member of the Politics for Her outreach team and works for the New York Immigration Coalition. She graduated in 2023 from St. Louis University in Madrid with a degree in international studies and a focus in French, Arabic, and Spanish. At her university, Natalie founded the Pride Club to create a space for queer students on campus. In addition to Spain, she has also lived and studied in Costa Rica,
Uruguay, and Jordan. As she starts her career post-graduation, Natalie centers her work around the values of intersectional feminism and inclusion, focusing on refugee, queer, and women's issues. We're excited to learn from you and about your organization. Thank you, Natalie, for being here.
So thank you everyone so much. I'm Natalie. Mine's going to be a little different because I'm not presenting really on my own work. I'm presenting on behalf of my organization. So while I've been semi-involved in these projects, you know, this is a really big group effort. We're a very large organization. We're everywhere. We have hubs literally all over the globe. So we do a lot of stuff and a lot of projects. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about our projects. Yeah, so we're Politics for Her. A youth-led feminist platform. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah, so a little more about ourselves. We're intersectional feminist youth-led digital platform and global movement. We mainly are online. We have Instagram, we have everything else, but we're starting more and more to do stuff in a physical space. A lot of everyone is, it's all young women from all over the globe, the vast majority being from the Swana region, specifically Morocco, because our founder's from Morocco. And we're just trying to get women and girls in every aspect of politics and get a lot of women and girls who wouldn't necessarily have access to be or know that they can participate in politics in their own countries, get them involved. So we have hundreds of projects running all the time. Across our different global hubs. I'm part of the global hub, and I do the outreach, but we also have the Asia hub, Europe hub, Swana. So a couple things we do, we produce a lot of policy briefs, literally like 3 or 4 a month generally. We also have a Femi newsletter where we just talk about like good things, or not necessarily good things, but things that feminists are doing worldwide that happen. We also have a lot of mentorship programs, one of which being Connect Her, where we both use mentors and mentees from our community, and then anyone else who wants to participate. Those usually get pretty big, and we do them about once a month. We also have a Digital Voices for Change movement and the Women for Leadership program, and these are just some of the programs we do. So it's really, we do a lot, and we're working always to develop more and work with lots of organizations worldwide to do it as well. So this is a couple of our policy briefs. I'm going to go through a couple of our policy briefs that we've worked on recently around gender and migration. It's not only what we focus on, but we do a lot with it. So we just released this one with the Migration Youth and Children platform. So we do a lot of collaborations with other organizations. This one's about unveiling the gender dimensions of forced displacement. And it's basically everything we do is from a youth perspective, but this one specifically was talking about what youth who are forcibly displaced and what are their recommendations, what are their solutions to how to solve this, and then a call to action for the community. We always have a call to action behind it as well. So then this is our most recent policy brief, and this is talking specifically about sexual exploitation in migration against women. And this is along the Central and Western Mediterranean routes from North to West Africa to Europe. Similar things we have, it's a lot, we try to interview and really connect with youth, with young women and girls and their unique experiences. And then also, it's not on one of the slides, but we actually just released another policy report. We really do a lot of them about online gender-based violence and the youth movement for democracy in the Swana region. And I have our materials here if anyone wants, if anyone's interested in them, I can pass them around. This is just a little like a short summary, and then there's a QR code for our entire policy report. It's really fantastic. We did really good research on it. And because we work with people always locally in those countries. But some other projects that we do that aren't just policy reports is we've been working on a lot of projects like actually that have physical, like really tangible changes. So one of our big projects recently in the last few months has been, we've been contracted with the UNHCR, and we've been bringing menstrual products to the women, girls in Morocco who've been displaced by the earthquake. So we've been working a ton there. We've been also doing a lot of work with the indigenous Amazigh women in Morocco, and we put out toolkits on how to speak to them in their communities, because we have women who are part of that indigenous community that work with our organization as well. And then our one we're really proud of that we just, we're still doing, but we just finally got proof that it arrived and everything. We have been making hygiene kits for women and girls in Gaza and just giving, here's our little list of just some pretty basic things that we've been doing, that we've been providing, but really simple things, but they need. And then so our last thing is we're starting a new we're always starting new projects, but this one is particularly interesting and really exciting that we're going to develop with Basant Shenandoah, who is a really fantastic feminist, who has an organization called Bust Up Blast, where she works with women. And Politics for Her, we will be doing a series of workshops with her organization aimed at young refugee women and giving them really practical skills on how to find a job, how to do interviews, how to write a cover letter, these really basic practical skills that refugee women don't always have access to. So we're working on providing career skills, empowerment advice, networking opportunities, and then one-on-one mentorship. And these will all be free, accessible, and multilingual based on our capacity, but we really have people who speak all languages. So this is our pitch, this is what we're working on. Generally, in the past, when we do activities like this, we have almost 500 people attend, so we're looking to do a series of them. And yeah, so that's some of the stuff we're working on.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm sorry that I may have seemed a bit distracted. We received a message from Anousheh about potentially briefly speaking on her work since she has to leave, but I don't know if she's actually still with us. See, she may have.
I am.
Okay.
Hear me?
Natalie,
But let's make sure.
And we'll get back to you.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
No,
Anousheh,
let's
if you
make,
want-
yes, but I don't want to take away the time from her,
We
please.
can go back to Natalie
no problem.
after, if that's okay with you. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay,
Pitch briefly and
okay,
say.
hi, yes. I'll introduce myself, don't worry. Don't even. I'm cool with that. Hi, everybody. I'm so inspired by all of you that have spoken and all of you that are here, and everyone just that has the, the desire and the inspiration to be part of making a better world. So it's fantastic. And I will just kind of say, Laura, that Laura and I have known each other for, well, we met a long time ago and we worked together and you supported what we were doing. And I'm so happy to be back in a capacity to support you and to see how this has grown. So I did want to kind of put that in because I think it's something to celebrate and congratulate, right? It's very important to recognize each other. So this is so fantastic. I'm sorry some of the people that were speaking, or at least one or two that have been online, have left. So I will quickly say that I am Anousheh Saeed. I'm a practitioner, development practitioner, community development practitioner, educator, social entrepreneur. I'm a co-founder of a movement called Borderless. One of my colleagues actually came on from Sussex. Amna, if you see her, she's here, who's studying gender studies and development and works with Borderless in Sussex, and she's online somewhere on the Zoom link, because I was like, hey, I need someone, my people, to be here. So what Borderless is a movement, to a global culture movement and a media movement to unite people who are making a better world. It's about bringing voices and actions of people together to show how we make a better world without barriers, without themes, without issues, beyond all of that, and how important that is to come together and to see that. And that's what Borderless is. And the sensibility of being borderless is to believe in the values of oneness of humanity, to believe in equality of humanity, and humanity being a very core focus, which is that it isn't about categorization of how we exist, but it is about a sense of belonging, and it's a sensibility and a sense of being human with each other. So how we work is being in communities. Part of what we do is discovering and being in community and producing stories of people like many of you, and I spoke to Laura about this earlier today, producing stories of people who are doing this work and to make it mainstream. it's very important to make what you're all doing and what is happening the mainstream in our media stories, right? And in the form of storytelling. So that's what Borderless does. Most importantly, my partner and I, and all of us who are part of Borderless, are doers. We're action oriented. That we have all been in a moment for a very long time in the world of just talking and thinking and philosophizing and understanding, and less focus on doing and being. And so what Borderless is about is actually, how do you be that? How do you act on being together, and coming to an understanding? So we're not so much focused on any one particular issue, as gender or migration or justice as a theme, but it is about how do you create an environment where you can unite people to come together as a global movement. So what we're doing, what we do is, one, we go into communities to discover, as part of our talent search, a global talent search, what we call, who are the people who are doing people, actions, organizations, groups, media, anyone doing anything to make a better world. And how do we connect with them? And how do we bridge those divides? Bridging divides is extremely important for us. And then it's producing stories, and how you create a platform. We have a platform that we are producing and putting together to create a space for people to come together worldwide, even if you cannot be in the communities. And the other big thing we're doing is we have a campus up in the Catskills in New York, where we are making a physical space for all sorts of people to come together that are not specific to any industry, any genre, any generation. What we believe as a borderless generation is that anyone is part of that, right? Anyone and everyone that's been part of creating change is part of that movement. And we need to see it as that. So that's what we're doing. I can obviously speak more about this. I'm happy to share with you. I know, Laura, I'm like quickly giving my pitch. I want to show you a short video if that's possible, if we can.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Of what Borderless is, if I can pull it up. Okay.
Should be able to share screen, yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty, let me make sure it is full screen. Wait, okay. Can you see it? I have to do it again. Sorry. It's like a learning. Wait a second, what happened? And, as part of our, while I'm loading this up, as part of our global talent search, I think everyone that's been on, you're all, for us, you're all borderless. You're all sort of bridging divides, acting towards the oneness of humanity, and this is what we are doing. I also, for those of you who might be interested, that while we're talking, I also teach a course on global migration at the Silberman School of Social Work, which is part of the Global Social Work School. So I invite and welcome all of you who might want to come and participate in any of that, in anything we're doing. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you can see this. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Can
Is
you
there
hear it?
supposed to?
Can you hear it?
No.
Okay, wait.
But you can
now?
also
Can you hear it?
know a little bit of sound, but you can also share it with us in the chat and we can
Yes.
play it.
Can you see it?
As we
Yeah.
go
Let me play it
and
now just to give you the text. It has a lot of text.
some time.
It's 30 seconds.
Okay, there it is now.
Watch it.
A little
Watch 30 seconds. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Of course, and I know that you have to leave, so I'm happy to either curate some of the questions or whatever feels good for
I'm
you.
happy. Yeah, I can stay a little bit, but I also don't want to take away. I can stay for like 3 minutes, but I also don't want to take away from Natalie.
Are there any very quick questions or comments for, I'm sure before we go back
There's
to
one in the chat.
Natalie? Yeah, there was a question in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a question from Yannis. Means no walls, no homes, no borders, no. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question, and I think something that, I mean, if we had the time to go into it more and more, I think it is about it's about a sensibility to see each other as equal. Number one, like one of our biggest values is, you know, of being borderless is the oneness of humanity, and what that means is it does require a very serious self-reflection of how do we break down some barriers of seeing each other as humans and seeing each other as equals and not seeing each other fitting into categories of certain types of typologies, which is what we have in the world that we live in, of being categorized as beings of certain kinds, and because policy does that and our world does that. And so borderless is definitely about a sensibility of how do you break down barriers that we have within ourselves to come to a common ground to be one. That does not mean that we are not different. That does not mean that we don't have differences, but it is about the humanity and the humanness of being one, which is above and beyond policy, which is above and beyond politics, which is above and beyond how society is constructed. And it's being that. You have to be it. You have to have the sensibility to be it. Some people call it empathy, compassion. It's more than that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions briefly from here in the room? Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Laura. So happy to see you again.
Yeah, you too. We'll be in touch. And thank you so much, Natalie, for your
No problem.
for your patience, for accommodating some of the aspects here. But let's return to Natalie's presentation. Thank you again so much. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
Yeah, please take center stage. All right.
And I can pass this out, like, if
There we
anyone's
go.
interested.
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, and I have more, but I think that's enough.
Truly appreciate your patience and flexibility with this.
Yeah, there was, I can't see the whole question.
Okay,
but-
maybe we can, if we.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we.
Oh.
Put it up here.
There we go. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We do some work with abortion, reproductive rights. I've personally worked on some reproductive rights stuff with politics for her. I would say just like right now, we're not particularly focusing on that. Because also what we do is we're working with people from these specific countries. And a lot of times we're working with people from, like displaced women and girls in Morocco or in Syria or in Gaza, where like abortion is a really important issue, but it's just not the most relevant for those people at this particular moment. So we really try and work with people in their context and what they deem most important. And it's something that is really interesting within our organization because we are really intersectional. We try, like within our own discussions, we always try to have a queer perspective involved, a racial one, have all those sides to it. But when you're working in these specific countries, that's not always possible. It's not always the best practice to try and like, I mean, if we're working with people in Syria, well, that's not a good example, but like considering the another speaker we had, but in some countries we're working on taking these baby steps, getting women and girls basic human rights or basic access to hygiene products. And so in a lot of countries, just like abortion, reproductive rights aren't really on the table to talk about right now, unfortunately. And so we're going to work within the context to then build up to that. It's not that we're against working with that. It's just, we have to decide where we're gonna actually get the most leeway and make the most change. But we've done lots of work in reproductive justice.
Thank you, yeah.
Your organization sounds really awesome and you're doing so much. What powers you? Is it funding? Is it good volunteer work power? Is it a great pool? Like what's the fuel?
Honestly, it is the participants, it's the members. So we're all volunteers. No one is getting paid for this. We do get funding. We're always doing grants, but every single cent goes into the work we do. No one makes money from this. But one thing that I'm always was we have these big global meetings, and I think one of the best things about Politisphere is the energy of being with these young women. Every single person wants to be there and wants to be there so bad. And it's really interesting coming from my perspective as an American and someone who's, as a woman, you know, obviously I've experienced sexism, but honestly, I've had every opportunity in the world. I've been incredibly lucky and I recognize that. And so me coming into this space, I started as I did an internship with them and I published a policy report myself. And I came into this space thinking, oh, this is just like any other organization. You know, it's a feminist organization. It interests me. But what I found fascinating is we get in these group calls, especially our big end of the year call, where everyone's talking about what their favorite part of the year was. Almost every single girl said, being in this organization is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Because we're working with girls in rural Somalia who are like, girls in India, girls everywhere who are like, I've never had a discussion about feminism before joining this organization. Like this, having this space for them is so special. And it's a really inclusive space. Everyone talks about everything. It's so welcoming and positive all day because I'm here representing, I'm the only one representing. All day I get texts. You're doing amazing. We're super excited for you. Great. Like truly the positive energy, the organization is the definition of like girl power feminism. And sometimes it can be a little cheesy. Like we go into the let's go women all the time, but it honestly creates such an incredibly positive environment where one of our big things is you can't say sorry. You're not allowed to say sorry. We're all women. We all say sorry too much. Anytime anyone in oh, I'm so sorry. We all go, no, you can't say sorry. It's fine. You made a mistake and that's fine. But that's the kind of environment. And that's what I think is everyone does this work because they love it, because they want to, and we see our tangible change. And it's so I also think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm so happy to be part of it every day.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it or if I already missed it. But I had recently done some research on the increase in digital trafficking or human trafficking and sex trafficking that happens online, especially in the global south. I know that as some of the work I had done, I saw that the Philippines is one of the highest countries for not only trafficking, but online trafficking.
Yeah.
Is that something that is being talked about, or? I know that's a big,
yeah,
big thing.
I know that we definitely do, in my circles within the organization, we do talk about that stuff, and it's hard to tell almost what we've done, what we're going to do, because we're always pitching new ideas. Everyone's talking about all these things and we have so many hubs. I know that we have done work with trafficking before. I don't know specifically if online right now, actually with UNHCR as well, and Project SOAR and the Girls Not Brides that are also here at CSW. We just did a massive collaboration with them about ending child marriage in Morocco. And so that was an aspect of is the trafficking aspect. I can't answer specifically if we've done that, but I know that if we haven't yet, we will.
So I'm wondering, how much of your work is online and how much is in person? Considering that there are so many regions that still don't have access, and migrant women in particular, I think, don't have access to necessarily to online.
I would say the vast majority of our work right now, especially in a global, our global hub, is mainly online. It's the policy reports. We do lots of online panels. We do lots of workshops online. A lot of it is online based, but what then our regional hubs do is they're doing the stuff more on the ground. So especially we've just been doing so much in the Swana region, because that's where the majority of our girls are, and we have 16 or something members in Morocco. So that's when we go into those communities and we work more on the ground. And so that is a big thing, is actually internet access and access to education is something that we're working on. And there's always just so many projects going on. But we definitely are doing that. But I'd say generally it is pretty online because also most of us have never met each other. We're all over the world, and like, I mean, all over the world. So it does mainly exist online, but yeah, we're working on getting more projects on the ground now. And so far we've had great success, especially in Morocco and in Gaza.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Natalie.
you.
Hey, well, thanks to all of you for being here and for providing a feedback, comments, and for engaging with all of these amazing things that are being done when we're talking about approaches towards migration and gender. I wanted to check in with else. Would you like to say a few words, or I can conclude, and then we can have some more food that's here.
Hi there. I was able to join you guys for the second half of the presentations. Really wonderful. I learned a lot. I was just actually typing in a message to let you guys know if any of you are interested in learning more about the International Migration Studies Master's Program at the Graduate Center. I'll put the link in the chat, and we have an open house next week, a virtual open house, and any of you are very welcome to join. So I'll put that in the chat as well. But I hope you guys will stay a little after, enjoy the goodies, the reception, the drinks, the snacks, and additional conversation. Thank you so much for all the participants and Lara Suzanne for organizing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Els, for putting this together. Thank you, Sophia, again, and the Scholar Strategy Network, and thank you, Coda Alliance, also for being here and partnering with us. I just have a few words to say. First of all, feel free to hang around, to mingle and to grab some food, and also to say this was such an amazing way to conclude day 4 of the first Global Gender and Migration Forum. So thank you for being here and for coming together around such an important topic. When I first envisioned the forum, one thing was clear, that we have to just have at least one space solely dedicated for ideation, for sharing, and for just being together. And tonight, this was it. But I also hope that you might consider joining us tomorrow to close out the forum. We will have an amazing art show at NYU Liberal Studies with art presented by migrant artists. And also, if you consider yourself as such, feel free to come and share your work through creative expression. Then this will also take place again, NYU Liberal Studies from 6 to 8 to close out the week. So I will say see you tomorrow and enjoy some of the good food that we have here. Thank you for being here. Thank you.